In today's video, we're going to look at the livestock best suited to warm and arid environments. Not every sheep is made to live in the heat, and not every cow can be productive in the snow. We've been breeding and perfecting our livestock for thousands of years to live and thrive in the specific climates we live in. So we'll be going to the driest of places, the desert climates. Desert climate-tolerant animals also do well in arid savannas, bushveld, and scrubland climates, so all of our options today will do well in the full desert, as well as the desert-adjacent climates too. We'll also only be taking the major livestock species for this round: the chickens, goats, sheep, cattle, pigs, and maybe throw a duck or turkey in there for fun. So let's start with the smallest, like we always do, and work our way up to the heavy hitters. You'll be happy to hear that Cornatux quail and all of the turkey breeds do well in the desert and generally dry and sparse environments, so there's no special considerations to take into account with these two less popular fowl species. Chickens, on the other hand, aren't quite as adaptable. Normally everyone would jump on the Rhode Island Reds and the Sussex as the most productive chickens that lay 250 or more eggs a year. But the truth is that neither of them fare very well in the high heat. It's not that they won't lay eggs or that they die if you brought them over to New Mexico, but they'll reduce their productivity and be more susceptible to mites and parasites. Instead, opt for the Leghorns, Andalusian, and the Fayumi. The Fayumi is a rather rare Egyptian breed with good laying rates, so even if you might pay a little more for these speckled beauties, you can't ask for a better desert chicken. They were bred in the world's largest desert after all, so you can bet that they'd do fabulously. Andalusians and Leghorns are pretty common birds because they're so hardy and they're excellent foragers while still being able to do well in a coop. Their production is a little higher than the Fayumi, but all of them still lay 250 or more eggs a year. Then there are the bantam breeds, including the Silkies. The hotter and drier it is, the better they do overall. Now they aren't quite production-level layers, but since you can keep more of them due to their smaller size, they still manage to feed the household with plenty more personality than the other, more volatile breeds. Though ducks are traditionally a cold climate animal that's very reliant on water for its survival, the warm temperate breeds don't need the water to feed themselves at all. For them, it's a matter of cooling, and, well, simply because it makes them happy. Those that are naturally inclined to mild and cold weather almost always only lay eggs during breeding season. But heat-loving ducks are the exact opposite. Some of them lay more eggs annually than a lot of production chicken breeds can. Khaki Campbell, Pekin, and Indian runner ducks are by far the most prolific layers and the most robust of the options on the table. There are some other good layers out there, but they're not quite as consistent, readily available, and they usually require more splash room to thrive. Personally, our favorite of the lot is the Indian runner ducks. They're smarter, making them easier to adhere to a schedule so that they can be utilized as pest control officers in the crop fields. If they're given the freedom to seek their own food, you'll only have to supplement 40% of their feed. They lay between 250 and 300 eggs a year, and they're the most marketable duck meat of the lot. For the goats, it's going to depend on whether or not you want a meat, milk, or dual-purpose breed. For the purely meat-bearing breeds, there are none that can compare to the Kalahari Red and the Boer goats. The carcass size, meat quality, and overall ability to forage on less than any other breed of animal on our list make them worth all the usual goat antics. They were bred in the deserts and bushvelds of South Africa, Namibia, and Botswana. Let's just say that those guys sure knew what they were doing when they developed these two breeds. For the milkers, the usual option would be the Saanens, who produce the most milk of all the goat breeds. But their pure white heads don't always do well with that amount of direct sun all day. They still do fairly well, but they need more infrastructure and cooling options than is feasible. If they struggle in the heat, their milk production will go down quite a bit. The Toggenburg and the Alpines are better suited to bring nearly the same amount of milk in warmer conditions. They're less likely to develop mastitis. And, as is true with all of the Scandinavian goats, they're relatively even-tempered animals. For a goat, at least. For the dual purpose, the La Mancha and Nubians are best. Nubians are going to be the better option between the two, simply because they were bred with the desert in mind, and they just store a little more fat than is usual in goat meat. The Pygmy and Nigerian dwarf goats are also great little producers if you're short on space and only interested in supplying the home. For the sheep, we're going to have to exclude the milking breeds right off the bat. It's not that people haven't kept them in warmer climates with some success, it's just that they're just made to be in the northern hemisphere, and they have virtually no disease resistance to anything occurring anywhere that doesn't get cold enough for winter snow. Luckily, you've still got plenty of options for meat and wool in the heat. Merinos are not only the best, most reliable fleece-bearing sheep, they're a great mutton sheep too. This is highly unusual in the wool breeds, but then again, the Merino was designed to be exceptional in all ways since its very beginnings, so we really shouldn't be surprised that they stand victorious as our wool and dual-purpose breed for the hot zones. For mutton alone, there are many options. Now you'll notice a lot of breeds originating from the south of Africa here again, and that's not just because this channel's researcher has a soft spot for the breeds from her neck of the woods, it's about the statistics too. Those breeds just do better in heat, and with minimal foraging available, there's no question about it. So here they are. The Damara, Dorper, and Ronderib Afrikaner are all excellent breeds, with their only downside being that they really need to be allowed to forage freely. The better options to pen successfully are the Catadins, St. Croix, and the Barbados Blackbellies. These last three are also the ones that can handle a little more moisture during rainy seasons, whereas the Damara, Ronderib, and Dorpers are prone to foot rot and fungal infections in their hooves if things get too wet for too long. So just keep that in mind if you do get a significant rainy season. The swines are the most adaptable animals of all, so there aren't many limitations with pig breeds. We would avoid the Mangalitsa and the Vietnamese potbellies though. Potbellies are made for tropical conditions, and they need more water and mud baths for cooling than many realize. The specific parasites and fly pressure in desert climates are so alien to them that they don't have any natural defenses against them. The Mangalitsa is the only pig in existence with wool-like hair, and predictably those attractive curls don't help to keep them cool in the kind of heat we're talking about at all. They need cooler climates, simple as that. The only real consideration to take when choosing a breed is the coloring. Pigs are susceptible to sunburn, so steer away from the pure white or pink breeds and stick to the colored varieties or the spotted ones. Actually, this is a good time to bring up an interesting point. Any sheep, goat, or cow with a brown, black, or reddish head will just generally do better in the heat. The whole body doesn't have to be one uniform dark color, just the dome needs that splash of color. Red or that reddish-brown color holds up best in the sun. So if you're undecided between breeds, let that be your deciding factor. It's not that all white-coated animals suffer, just look at the boar goats for instance. But even just a little red on that coat goes a long way to protect them from the sun. The reddish-brown pigs are no different. Tamworth, Duroc, Hereford, Red Wattle, and the Berkshire are all fantastic options for the desert and the brush fields. Finally, we've reached the mighty cattle. Starting with the beef production breeds, again we have plenty to choose from. But we're going to avoid the ones that are hard to come by in the US, like the African pygmy cows, Ankole Watusi, Inguni, and the Afrikaner cattle. They're all superior to almost all the other heat-tolerant breeds, but their smaller size, cultural significance, or general exotic nature is just too specific for them to have reached wider markets just yet. Raramuri, Criollo, Senepol, Irish Dexters, and Brahman are the most well-adapted and most common to procure on US, South American, and Australian soils. The smallest is the Raramuri, originating from Chihuahua, Mexico, so as you can imagine, they're just perfect for the desert. They're slowly gaining popularity in the southern US states, and not nearly as expensive as the other rare breeds are. Irish Dexters are about the same size, and they have a little milk under the right conditions, though it'll only ever be enough for personal use. The Senepol is the middle-sized breed with a little more fat, but the Brahman is by far the more superior specimen in the long run. They deliver a good cut that can produce a fair amount of marbling under the right conditions, and even serve as a decent enough milker. They aren't commercial-level milking breeds by any means, but they definitely produce enough for the family, around 7 to 9 liters, during peak lactation season, so they're also our best option for dual-purpose breeds. Since we're on the subject of dairy cows, well, the pickings are slim here. The ones with good heat tolerance are almost exclusively from India and Pakistan, but that's where the Brahman comes into the picture again. Good dairy breeds like the Jersey and Brown Swiss are heat tolerant, but only to a certain degree. If they are forced into extremely arid conditions, they'll need a great deal of infrastructure and cooling options to truly perform well. Luckily, they all crossbreed well with the Brahman, which will bring up the dairy quantities significantly. The Australian Friesian Sahiwal is a good dairy cow developed in Australia, specifically with heat tolerance in mind, but they're very hard to come by outside their country of origin. We'd have put them up as the best desert dairy cow of all. But rarity and cost of procurement needs to be taken into account after all. So we'd advise to opt for a crossbreed between the Brahman and any of the major milking breeds to give them a little more warm climate DNA to handle your area. Now we'd like to pass this conversation off to our viewers. Do you live in this kind of climate? If so, what livestock served you best? Or maybe you're thinking of starting out. If that's the case, what breeds were you looking at for your farm? Let us know in the comments below. There's no greater source of information than from those that are speaking from experience. And this community is what it is today because of those of you who are willing to share your nuggets of wisdom, advice, and support. And while you're at it, don't forget to like and subscribe too. We'll see you in the next one. Cheers.